We are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love Sigmund Freud. She doesn't want peace. She wants tension. Freud saw it long before you did that. Beneath every polished smile and gentle embrace lies a hunger, not for love, but for conflict, for submission, for psychological gravity. And if you as a man do not understand this, if you still believe that flowers, reassurance, and consistency will secure her loyalty, then you are already lost, because Freud exposed what most men still deny. Female desire is not drawn to safety. It is drawn to danger that doesn't need her. This is not an insult. This is not bitterness. This is anatomy. It is psychology carved into bone and blood. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, the man who dared to unmask the unconscious mind, devoted his life to one question: what does a woman want? And after decades of listening to wives, mistresses, daughters, and seductresses, he gave us the most terrifying answer of all. Even she doesn't fully know, but her body knows, her instinct knows. Freud believed that human desire, especially in women, was not rational, not moral, not socially correct. It was primitive, fluid, and dangerously real. He described female sexuality as a dark continent, unexplored, unpredictable, and violently suppressed by centuries of polite civilization. And in that suppression, Freud discovered something chilling: that what women claim to want and what they respond to are often not the same thing. She says she wants a kind man, but she texts back the one who disappeared. She says she wants a man who listens, but she obsesses over the one who makes her feel invisible. She says she wants stability, but a heart races for the one who lives on the edge of chaos. Why? Because Freud understood that female desire isn't about logic, it's about lack, about chasing what she cannot fully possess. And the man who gives her everything openly, eagerly, emotionally, that man is no longer a mystery. He becomes predictable, he becomes boring, he becomes disposable. Freud called it the repetition compulsion, a psychological phenomenon where we are drawn not to what heals us, but to what reactivates our deepest wounds. And women, shaped by evolutionary pressures to test, select, and survive, are drawn to men who activate emotional conflict, not out of malice, but out of instinct, because it is in that conflict, when you withhold validation, when you resist her pull, when you stay centered in your purpose, that she feels the electricity of uncertainty. And in that uncertainty, she feels attraction. But no one told you this. You were told to be available, to be vulnerable, to pour your soul out in text messages and hope she'd respect your honesty. And yet you watched her lose interest, slowly, cruelly, without explanation. You thought something was wrong with you, but Freud would say, no, something is wrong with what you were taught to believe about women. He wrote that repression is the cornerstone of civilization, especially sexual repression. But repression doesn't erase desire, it distorts it. It drives it underground, and in women whose roles were historically tied to modesty, family, and submission, that distortion created a double life. One conscious, polite, nurturing, and one unconscious, wild, untamed, drawn to the very things society said she should avoid. This is why the fantasy of the bad boy never dies, because he represents something ancient. A man who cannot be tamed, a man who refuses to beg, a man whose soul is not up for sale. You've seen it play out in real life. You gave her everything and it wasn't enough. You answered her calls, you picked her up, you posted her, you shared your fears, and still, she drifted cold, bored, unimpressed, because she didn't want your openness. She wanted your center. She wanted the part of you that stays untouched by her mood swings and emotional storms. The part of you that isn't moved by her silence, that doesn't panic when she pulls away. She wanted to feel your strength, not through protection, but through indifference. Freud wrote that anatomy is destiny, a phrase that has been misquoted for decades. He didn't mean that biology rules all. He meant that deep structures, sexual instincts, reproductive drives, primal selection shape what we desire before we even think. And for women, that desire is not politically correct, it is not sanitized, it is not romantic, it is raw. And the man who understands this not intellectually but in his posture, his presence, his silence, that man becomes unforgettable. But you were raised to fear your masculine edge, to soften it, to dull it down in the name of emotional safety. And now you live in confusion. You wonder why she leaves, why she tests you, why she argues without reason, provokes you, pulls away at the peak of intimacy. It's because she doesn't crave harmony, she craves your refusal to be broken. She craves your core, the part of you that can walk away and not flinch. And the moment you abandon that, the moment you bend to her emotional chaos, you become the very thing she resents. A man who can be owned. Freud wasn't trying to destroy love, he was trying to understand it. He believed that love is always entangled with conflict, that desire cannot exist without tension. And this, he said, is the tragedy of modern man. He wants to be both desirable and obedient, powerful and pleasing, dominant and emotionally tamed, but these are opposites. Desire demands imbalance. It thrives on tension, and the moment you give her everything, you rob her of the chase. She wants to surrender, but only to a man who cannot be manipulated. She wants to submit, but only to a man whose purpose outranks her emotions. She wants to be claimed, but only by the man who doesn't need her to feel complete, and Freud, for all his controversy, saw this with brutal clarity. He didn't blame women. He blamed the illusions. Men were sold. Illusions that keep them weak, lost, and endlessly heartbroken. You thought showing her your wounds would make her stay. You thought proving your loyalty, your consistency, your emotional depth would unlock her devotion. But Freud would tell you what stirs the female unconscious is not vulnerability, it's dominance of the self, not control over her, but control over your hunger. It is your restraint, your unshakable frame, your sovereign presence that triggers her deepest feminine response, not your feelings, not your pleading. Understand something Freud spent his entire life dissecting. Women do not fall in love with your softness. They fall in love with your containment. The man who has urges and doesn't act on them. The man who is tempted and doesn't fall. The man who is capable of love but does not worship it. That man in her unconscious mind is dangerous, and danger in the Freudian sense is not violence. It's power without dependency. You have been taught to reverse this polarity, to lead with need, to wear your heart on your sleeve and call it strength. But it's not strength, it's exposure. And when your soul is exposed before it has been tested, when you seek to be chosen before you have chosen your own mission, you are no longer a man. You are a servant waiting for a queen, and she cannot love a servant. She can use one, she can depend on one, but she cannot desire one. Desire, Freud said, is built on the tension between longing and withholding. It is a dance between hunger and resistance. And this is why women lose interest the moment they feel they fully have you. Not because they are cruel, but because desire dies in certainty. You may think love is about transparency, about giving her your every thought, your every fear, your every inch of emotional availability, but Freud saw the flaw in that. He wrote that the unconscious mind does not care about honesty. It responds to archetypes, symbols, power dynamics, emotional contrast. She doesn't want to see all of you, she wants to see what she cannot reach. And you, modern man, with all your therapy and your good intentions, have become too reachable, too readable, too manageable. And in doing so, you have made yourself emotionally safe and sexually invisible. Because safety does not ignite passion. Safety does not spark longing. Safety does not awaken the instinct to submit, and the instinct to submit is ancient, buried in every myth, every love story, every feminine fantasy is not a man who obeys, but a man who conquers himself. This is why Freud placed so much importance on the ego, the superego, the structures of control. Because the man who is guided only by the ID, his impulse, his lust, his longing, is not a man. He is a slave to himself, and no woman will respect that. She may toy with him, she may use him, but she will not kneel to him. The man she kneels to in body or spirit is the man who stands taller than his own desire. That's the paradox. You don't win her heart by chasing her. You win it by becoming the kind of man who doesn't chase anything except his own destiny. But you've been sold a counterfeit map, one that says women want emotional availability more than they want psychological strength. That they want a man who listens more than a man who leads. That they want equality when they really crave polarity. That's why so many men today feel invisible, emasculated, confused. Used because they are acting in ways that kill attraction, then wondering why love turns cold and worse. They blame themselves for it. They assume they are not good enough. But Freud would say you are not aligned with your nature, and neither is she not really. She's frustrated, irritable, restless. Because what she really wants, what her nervous system longs for, is a man she cannot bend, a man who lives by a code, not by emotion, who speaks not in apologies but in direction. And when she finds such a man, even if he's not her type, even if he's not her fantasy, her body remembers something her mind forgot. This is the kind of man I can trust without controlling. This is the kind of man I can follow without fear. This is the kind of man who can handle me without needing me. You don't become this man by watching more videos. You become him by rebuilding the architecture of your soul. Freud would call it sublimation, the process of redirecting your primitive impulses into higher order pursuits. Your anger becomes ambition, your lust becomes discipline, your heartbreak becomes legacy. And through that transmutation, you become more than a man who reacts. You become a man who creates. She wants that creator, not just the man with a job or a routine, but the man who has tamed his own chaos, the man who walks into the room and doesn't need to prove anything because his presence already announces everything. And the more you chase her approval, the more she pulls away. Not out of cruelty, but because female desire cannot survive in the presence of emotional begging. It demands reverence, and reverence only flows toward the man who does not kneel. This is the truth Freud knew would be hated, that women are not attracted to your soul until they respect your spine. That love is not the beginning of male power. It is the byproduct of it. That a woman's admiration must be earned through silence, through mastery, through the withholding of need. And that once you give up your center to make her feel emotionally safe, you have already surrendered the only part of you she was ever drawn to. You were taught to lead with your heart, but Freud would say a man must first lead with his spine. Because when you surrender your masculine core in exchange for affection, you don't earn love. You earn quiet contempt. And she may not say it, she may not even understand it, but it will show in her eyes, in her tone, in the slow erosion of admiration, because she cannot desire a man who has no gravity of his own. She doesn't test you because she's cruel. She tests you because her unconscious mind is searching for a man who will not flinch, a man who can say no without anger, who can walk away without drama, who can love her without losing himself. Freud called this the reality principle, the ability to delay gratification in the service of long-term power. And a man who cannot delay his emotional impulses, who reacts every time she withholds, every time she cries, every time she goes cold, is not a man ready for reverence. He is a child looking for a mother in a lover's body. This is the brutal truth. She cannot mother you and desire you at the same time. One kills the other the moment she feels like your emotional caretaker. The romance dies. You think she left because of what you did, but Freud would argue she left because of what you stopped being. You stopped being a force. You became a function, something she could predict, and female desire cannot survive without mystery, without awe, without tension. You may be good, you may be loyal, but if you are not anchored in sovereignty, if your life doesn't move with or without her, you are not a man. In her eyes, you are an accessory, replaceable. But this isn't hopeless. In fact, it's the most liberating truth you will ever hear. Because it means you don't have to become someone else. You simply have to return to what was buried, your purpose, your discipline, your silence. The silence that doesn't beg to be heard. The purpose that doesn't need permission, the edge that doesn't apologize. Freud believed the path to self-realization wasn't pleasure. It was mastery, not of the world, but of yourself. So the solution, brother, is not to resent her for the games. The solution is to stop playing them, to stop chasing approval and start building a life that doesn't require it. She's not your prize, she's not your purpose. She is the reflection of your own internal leadership. If you lead yourself, she will follow. If you orbit her, she will run, not because she's shallow, but because biology does not negotiate with fantasy. What Freud dared to say, what still haunts relationships today, is that love is not enough. Not if it isn't grounded in power, emotional power, sexual polarity, psychological strength. That is what creates desire. That is what builds a bond that does not decay with routine. A man who commands respect before he seeks love will always have both. But the man who seeks love hoping it will give him respect will always have neither. So here is your call, not to harden, not to hate, but to remember. You were never built to be passive. You were not designed to be emotionally devoured in exchange for conditional affection. You are not here to beg for loyalty. You are here to forge yourself into something rare, something unmoved by rejection, untouched by manipulation, unreachable by anything that does not serve your deepest mission. Because when you become that man, when you walk not with arrogance but with unshakable self-direction, something strange happens. The same women who dismissed you begin to look again. The same silence that once offended them begins to magnetize them because they can sense it that you no longer need them to complete you. And that, paradoxically, is the only moment you become truly desirable. Freud's brutal truth wasn't that women are broken, is that they are tuned to a different frequency, one that rewards sovereignty, not softness, one that longs to surrender but only to something worthy of surrendering to. And that worth is not measured in how much you please, but in how little you flinch. So stop bleeding for validation. Start standing in truth. Build your life so completely that whether she stays or leaves, your mission continues, unshaken. This is the only path to peace, not partnership born out of fear, but one born out of respect. Not love built on need, but love built on mutual power. And if this message awakened something in you, if it made you remember who you were before the world told you to kneel, then don't walk away quietly. Like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support this movement, this war against mediocrity, check the link in the description. Your support, no matter how small, helps us keep speaking what no one else dares to say. Because this is not just a video, it's a reminder. You are not here to be chosen, you are here to become.